How's it, guys? Welcome to this morning's devotional. We're going to be spending the next 3 days looking at the end of 1 Samuel chapter 17, at the end of the David kind of Goliath story. And then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we're going to be looking at the Easter story as we run in towards Easter this coming weekend. And we really are super excited about that. But for this morning, our story picks up. Yesterday we spoke about the David and Goliath's whole interaction. But just before that, David arrives in town or in the camp from his dad with bread and with cheese and with this roasted grain, and he sees what's going on with Goliath, and he's asking people questions, and his oldest brother freaks out at him. This is just before the battle. And so this is what happens from verse 28, 1 Samuel 17 verse 28. When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burnt with anger at him and asked, "Why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle." "Now what have I done?" said David. "Can't I even speak?" Then he turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter, and the men answered him as before. And so this morning I'd like to speak just briefly to us about the power of words. And I think there's a lot of talk nowadays and understanding nowadays that our identity is incredibly important. And our identity can be defined by what others have said about us. But it's also a biblical principle, understanding who is defining who I am. Because I think for many of us, if I had to take a step back and say, how do I perceive myself? And who has defined that perception? So the things that I think I can do, the things I think I can't do, the things that I've attempted in my life, the things where I felt like I'm a failure, all those kind of things. Who has defined whether something was a failure? Who has defined whether I was good at something? Who has defined where I'm successful or where I'm gifted? And it's a great question to ask, because David comes up against it. Look what his brother says to him. Now this is his oldest brother. He says, "I know how conceited you are." Not just you being conceited in this moment. He's having a go at David's identity. "I know how conceited you are. I know how wicked your heart is." I mean, that's hard coming from your brother. "You came only to watch the battle." And I'd like to just say this, that in what his brother is saying to him, there definitely are elements of truth, because no one's perfect. If you take Cindy and I, 4 and a bit years ago, we came and planted Center Church here in Johannesburg. We left Pietermaritzburg and we relocated to Johannesburg to come plant a church. And when I look at what's inside of my heart, I feel completely disqualified a lot of the time. I really do, because I'm not perfect. I don't have it all together. Yet somehow God has blessed us, and God has seen fit to gather a group of people together, and we've been able to accomplish something in planting this church. But that doesn't mean that I'm perfect. Because even within me, if you had to say to me, "John, I know how conceited you are," there've been times when I have been conceited, 100%. There's been times where I've accredited the success of what Center Church has become to myself, and then very quickly realized it wasn't me. And other times I know how wicked your heart is, where I've been jealous or I've been angry about things or frustrated about stuff in my heart, 100%. And this is the thing. All of us have a choice where our motives are sifted, where our heart is sifted. Because if I go to Jesus first and I allow him to sift my heart, because he can see my heart, he knows who I truly am, he knows what I'm really thinking, and if I allow him to sift my heart, then when I go stand in front of men, my motives have already been sifted, and I'm not insecure, because it's too late in the moment to have my motives sifted. David, when he's standing there in front of his brother can have a go at him and say all these things to him about David's, his heart and all this kind of stuff, but David spent so much time with Jesus beforehand that he can listen to his brother and go, "You know what, it's your issue, it's not my issue. Like, this is you shooting at me, but it's not going to define who I am." Because if David had let what his brother was saying to him define him, he would have left to go home with his tail between his legs, and he never would have accomplished what God had called him to accomplish in killing Goliath. If I haven't allowed Jesus to sort out my motives of my heart, in the secret place, in time with him, as I spend time in his word, like James, the book of James says, when I read the word of God, it's like looking in a mirror. It shows me what's really going on inside my heart. If I haven't allowed God to sift my heart like that, then I lose my confidence and I back down from the moments when I need to stand. And friends, I think it's so important to take an honest good look and say, what does God say about who I am? And what do others say about who I am? And who am I going to choose to believe? And allow God to sift your motives. Allow God to look at our hearts and go, John, this issue in your life, or whatever your name is, this is an issue in your life, and allow him to begin to deal with it. Because the enemy who we are up against, he will wait to the moment when it is absolutely critical for us to stand, and he reminds us of our weakness in that moment, and it can completely cripple us. I want to finish just quickly by saying one thing to fathers, mothers, leaders and influencers going forward. What you have been doing and the sphere that you have is incredibly important. And one of the things I think that's so important here is when Eliab speaks to David, he says to him, what's the line? He says, with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? And I think all of us have got a role in any leadership position that we have, that we aren't like Eliab. Because South Africa and across the world, at the end of all of this, we're going to need people who are going to stand up and lead strong. And if we're cutting people down because we're insecure or because we feel threatened and we're making small of their achievements, like Eliab was doing about David. David didn't have a few sheep. His father was a wealthy man. He had lots of sons. It was a lot of sheep that he had. But he's making light of what David has done. And I think it's incredibly important over this time that we nurture this belief and this ability to see the small little things that people have done, the seemingly insignificant, and don't make light of it. So when we see a little change happening inside of someone, we don't just write it off and go, oh, so what? This is look what I did, or look at the big thing. But to look for those little things, we need to be nurturing people because we're going to need people who can stand. In Zechariah 4 verse 10, Zechariah writes, do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin, to see the plumb line in Zerubbabel's hand. And the context there is this guy Zerubbabel goes back to Jerusalem after it's been destroyed, and he starts building. But it's like small when he starts building, one brick on top of the next brick. And can I encourage us, we need to be so careful with our words. Do our words build life into others? Because on the one side we can be David, but then this is a warning also to those of us who perhaps in a position like Eliab, where we are an older brother. Are we going to cut people down with our words and say harsh things to them, or are we going to look for the growth? And when David arrives with his wheat and his bread and whatever, and he's on another mission, that we encourage him to come be part of the bigger thing, and we speak words of life over him instead of cutting him off at the knees. We don't be insecure, that we encourage robust discussion and out-of-the-box thinking. We're going to need that going forward. Let's nurture the people that we're leading. If it's our children, if it's guys in our teams, in our workplace, wherever it is, that we are those that when people meet us, we're not cutting them off at the knees and breaking them down with our words. Thanks so much for joining us this morning, and we'll see you guys tomorrow morning.